Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's that time of year once more. The virgin tallow has been rendered for black candles, the daggers are sharpened, the pumpkins have been carved, and the trees festoon themselves in colorful costume. The sharp bite of fall always turns our minds to ghosts and ghouls, which is why more dungeon masters than any other time of year will try to assemble a horror game. They seem so simple, after all. A little drama in your voice, a little candlelight, and a thump on the table for a good jump scare. Well, it ain't that easy, kiddies. Open those grimoires and uncap your pens. School's in session, and if you want to really get under your player's skin, then you should take a few notes. The first thing you need to do, if you're serious about a horror game, is to build atmosphere. Not just in the game's setting and description, but at your table. Only an idiot would try to run a horror game on a sunny Sunday afternoon with the blinds open and sports on the living room TV. You want a controlled environment. Minimize distractions that could break the spell you're weaving. Have your players put their phones on vibrate, and if you aren't using the devices as game resources, keep them put away. Make sure you have enough light to see, but if you can, dim the glare. If you're feeling theatrical and want a campfire feeling, use lanterns or candles to add a spooky touch. Don't overdo it, though. You're not running a seasonal funhouse. If you find yourself putting Midnight Syndicate on a loop, chances are you've gone too far. Horror is all about fear. It's the climax of the whole endeavor. Ask any conductor, though, and they'll tell you the big crescendo is something you have to build to. It's the culmination of all the hard work the orchestra put in to get to that point. So before you focus too much on horror, you need to understand dread. Dread, you see, is all about the anticipation. It's the foreplay, if you will. And the most effective way to start your players marinating in dread is to ratchet up the tension. Now, every dungeon master has their own style, but there are a few universal tricks that should work with most groups. First and foremost, remember, you control the flow of information. If your players are used to perception or knowledge rolls just being read aloud, try leaning over to whisper to the player who made the check, or call them into the other room for a private chat. Feeling out of the loop can immediately work on a player's psyche and have them jumping at shadows. Another good tactic is to force players to make heal checks to understand the severity of wounds, not just for themselves, but for their opponents. If the party hits a monster with everything they've got, and it just keeps coming, that increases the tension. But if you let slip that it's 3 hit points away from death, you've just torpedoed your ship of dread. Last but not least, prevent as much metagaming as you can. If you have to, totally alter a monster's stats so that nothing players think they know is true. Require them to roll the proper knowledge checks to understand the beast on the table, rather than the one in their memories. Tension is a necessity for a horror game to work on the players' minds, but it's important to remember that tension is a fragile thing. One wrong joke, and all that hard work is flushed right down the jakes. So here are my suggestions. Keep out-of-character talk to a minimum. Open the noisy snack bags before the game gets rolling, and for the love of all things holy, check your rules references beforehand. Nothing kills tension faster than a dungeon master spending 5 minutes looking up how a monster's power set works. Lastly, consider using a DM screen. You need your players to trust you here, as a lot of tables refuse to let a dungeon master do their business in private. But keeping your roles out of sight can keep players focused on what's happening, instead of reverse engineering villain stats based on your rolls. If you do this, try taking it a step further by making some passive rolls on the players' behalves. If they're checking for a trap, and they know they rolled a 1, it's hard for them to trust there's no trap there. But if they don't know what the roll was, it takes away any chance to metagame, even if it was accidental. One of the biggest mistakes dungeon masters can make when it comes to horror is getting impatient. Now, I sympathize here, I really do. You've had this monster roaming your mental halls for weeks, and you have this heart-stopping climax planned, and you can't wait to see the look on their faces. If you rush toward your final set piece, though, your players are going to be underwhelmed by it. It doesn't matter how talented you are, how hard you worked, or who is at your table. You need to pace yourself. Think of a really good joke. You know, the ones that take some time to properly set up. Have you ever tried to skip ahead to the punchline? If you did, I bet you didn't get a lot of laughs. Horror is just like comedy in that way, except for the screaming. We all have those things that get to us. For some people, it's children being killed. For others, it's sexual assault. Some people get squeamish when the gore gets heavy, and others will tap out if your game is full of sudden yet inevitable betrayals. That last one in particular can lead to some of the hardest feelings at a table. Because you want your players to have fun, it's important to give them a red button they can hit if something strikes a nerve. If a game stops being fun, make sure your players have a phrase they can use to pop their parachute and excuse them from the scene. In other words, make sure you've got a safe word if your game is going to dark places. It's also important to remember that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So before you even start planning a horror game, have your players take a survey. Ask them what their no-go topics are, and avoid them. This way you can still enjoy your spooky romp into madness, but you won't have to worry about anyone's emotional landmines along the way. That's all for this installment of Dungeon Hacks. If you liked it, consider sharing it with your friends and subscribing to the channel. If you've got questions, or there are some horror game strategies we didn't touch on, leave them in the comments below. Lastly, if you want to help support Dungeon Keeper Radio, look for our Patreon link in the description. A little tip can go a long way. For now, though, let me wish you happy holidays and ghoulish gaming.